sharing is one of the hallmarks of human behavior. Give me a cookie, and I'm more likely to give you one later. But our bonobo cousins have an odd variation on the practice. They share with strangers before friends. The finding is in the journal PLOS 1. Researchers tested bonobo sharing in experiments involving 14 of the apes. All were born in the wild. In the primary experiment, bonobos were placed in a cage with food, and they could choose to admit either a known member of their group, a stranger, or both. In 51 trials, most bonobos shared the feast, but they let the stranger in first. Why choose an outsider over a friend? In another experiment, the scientists found bonobos only shared when doing so led to a social interaction. Giving up some food to strangers lets these apes expand their social network. This behavior may have evolved to promote social tolerance, in contrast with chimps' sometimes deadly aggression against strangers. Which means that even when food is offered, there's still no such thing as a free lunch. Ultraviolet rays don't just bronze sunseekers on the beach. Underwater, they can give hammerhead sharks a suntan. And worse, give fish skin cancer. So says a study in the journal PLOS 1. Researchers caught 136 coral trout in the southern Great Barrier Reef. 15% of them had black lesions on their skin, melanoma. Pathogens, toxic chemicals, or UV rays can all cause melanoma. But DNA tests ruled out the presence of pathogens. And the fish were caught in the pristine waters of a marine sanctuary, so pollution wasn't to blame. Turns out, the trout's cancer cells looked just like those of fish who'd been hit with UV radiation in the lab. So the researchers concluded that sunshine was the culprit. Makes sense, they say, because these trout live near the world's biggest hole in the ozone layer, meaning more exposure to UV rays. Another recent study, this one in the journal Science, says the severe storms delivered by climate change could punch new holes in the ozone layer, upping our dose of radiation on land and at sea. And that's no fish story. Mosquitoes are an unpleasant fact of summer. But 2012 has been especially bad for running into these irritating insects. Because some carry West Nile virus. And they're known to have infected some 2,000 people in 48 states this year. At least 87 people have died from the infection, which can cause swelling in the brain. Almost half of the cases have been in Texas. And to lower the risk of infection, some areas have taken extreme measures, including aerial pesticide spraying. But people can take some simple measures on their own to reduce their risk. In an essay in Annals of Internal Medicine, public health experts make recommendations. First, simply avoid areas likely to have mosquitoes. And if you can't, or don't want to, stay indoors, wear long clothes that cover your skin and use insect repellent. Eliminating standing water, such as that pooled in puddles or in used containers, can also help reduce mosquito breeding grounds and populations overall. Stopping the mosquito spread helps in the long run, which is what we have to deal with. Because scientists say that West Nile virus is, unfortunately, here to stay. Being physically active has numerous benefits. Now a study has looked closely at the effects of fitness in the midlife years for preventing debilitating chronic diseases later. The ongoing study gathered fitness stats for more than 18,000 adults, and followed their health status into old age. Assessing 40 years of that data, the analysis finds that those who had higher fitness levels in their 30s, 40s, and 50s were substantially less likely to have a chronic condition between the ages of 70 and 85. The findings are in the Archives of Internal Medicine. Physical fitness seemed to stave off heart disease and heart failure, which might not be a big surprise. But it also reduced rates of diabetes, kidney disease, and even Alzheimer's disease. Current recommendations suggest adults make time for at least 20 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a day, such as fast walking, jogging, biking, or swimming. Busy middle-aged people might find it especially hard to make time for such exercise. But a small investment looks like it could pay big health dividends for decades to come. Here's one way bats might get their next meal: by eavesdropping on flies having sex. Bats eat a lot of seemingly undetectable flies. To find out how the winged mammals find the insects, researchers set up a video camera inside a cowshed that was home to a bat colony and lots of bugs. The video showed that bats rely on their echolocation skills to detect flies at a specific time, when they're engaged in rather noisy sex. Flies are usually quiet in bat territory and sit on cluttered ceilings in caves, where background noise masks the echoes from their movement. But when flies are feeling frisky, males can't help but flutter their wings, emitting a burst of click sounds that the bats pick up on. During more than 1,000 sexual encounters caught in the act on video, 5% of the insects were caught in the act by bats. The research is published in the journal Current Biology. The study shows that ignorance can be safer than carnal knowledge when predators are on the prowl. What we're bringing for our users is basically an immersive experience of a huge portion of the NASA Kennedy Space Center facility. Ryan Fowler, project manager of Google's Street View. In honor of the center's 50th anniversary, Street View is adding more than 6,000 images of the Space Center, the starting point for Apollo and Space Shuttle missions. So you can go into the facility, you can go into some of the large areas there, like the Vehicle Assembly Building. You can go down to the launch pad and actually go up several floors of the launch pad and see where the astronauts would walk and where they would go as they were boarding the shuttle. The shuttle is now a thing of the past. But someday Kennedy will host a new generation of spacecraft. When we were there, we actually got to take a snapshot of these structures and these systems in place before all those transitions happened. Many of those facilities are going to be decommissioned or converted to different uses, so the opportunity to kind of capture that moment in Street View and preserve it, and make it accessible to people around the world, is, I think, really valuable and important. The Chukchi Sea lies between Alaska and Russia, just north of the Bering Strait. Shell Oil hopes to begin drilling in these Arctic waters in the next few days, if the U.S. government grants permission. The ship Noble Discoverer will drill 2 exploratory wells to determine what, if any, hydrocarbons are beneath the seabed, and how well drilling equipment can withstand the rigors of the far north. Those rigors include everything from swirling currents and floating ice chunks to migrating whales. There's coral there. Scientists sent to the region by Greenpeace have found sea raspberry, a soft, deep-sea species. Other such deep-sea corals bore the brunt of BP's catastrophic blowout in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010. It remains to be seen whether offshore drilling in the Arctic can be any safer than drilling in balmier waters. Already, Russia spills some 30 million barrels of oil in the Arctic each year, according to Greenpeace, and that's on land. Regardless, burning oil is one of the primary causes of climate change. Such global warming has thawed the Arctic above all, opening access to yet more oil. Humanity's thirst for oil has yet to gauge its own depths. Birds face many man-made mortal threats: windows, cats, habitat destruction, even climate change. And now, there's poison in their bird seed. You see, the Scott's Miracle-Gro company had been in the habit of applying banned pesticides to its wild bird food products. In particular, the company applied a chemical known as Storeside 2 to its bird food, despite a warning label for that product that reads Storeside 2 is extremely toxic to fish and toxic to birds and other wildlife. Why add a compound toxic to birds to food meant to be eaten by birds? Because Scott didn't want bugs infesting its bird food during storage. By the time Scott stopped adding the pesticide in March 2008, the company had sold some 70 million bags of adulterated bird food. The company also submitted false documents to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, distributed pesticides with misleading labels, and distributed illegal pesticides. As a result, the EPA slapped the company with $12.5 million in criminal fines and civil penalties. So when you put out new bird seed this winter, at least you won't be inadvertently poisoning any chirpers. Oh, and keep those cats inside, too. Our Milky Way galaxy has two large satellite galaxies orbiting it. They're known as the Large and Small Magellanic Clouds. And humans have been aware of the existence of these celestial objects for at least a millennium. Recently, researchers were curious about whether our configuration is fairly typical, or an astronomical anomaly. In other words, is our corner of the cosmos ordinary? Now a new study finds that the Milky Way and its companion galaxies are an unusual combination, but they're not one of a kind. Astronomers in the UK and Australia looked at thousands of galaxies to try to find an analog of our arrangement. The search turned up two close replicas, each with a Milky Way-like galaxy accompanied by two galaxies comparable to the Magellanic Clouds. But the researchers also concluded that such arrangements are pretty rare. Only 0.5% of Milky Way-like galaxies have companions like ours. The Magellanic Clouds may be transitory features. In a few billion years, the Milky Way may absorb them completely. So someday our corner of the cosmos could be pretty ordinary after all. The eyes are the windows to the soul. As such, they can reveal if someone is lying, right? Cop shows, advice shows, even some organizational training courses hold that if somebody looks up and to the right, they're probably lying. Up and to the left means they're telling the truth. Now a study says that there is no connection between eye movement and lying. The work is in the journal Public Library of Science 1. Researchers tested eye movement and honesty in multiple ways. For example, they tracked the eye movements of subjects who were lying or telling the truth about things they had recently done. There was no correlation between lying and eye direction. The researchers also closely analyzed 52 archived news videos of real people, making a public plea for the safe return of a missing relative. In half the videos the plea was sincere, but in half there was strong evidence that the speaker was involved in the crime. Again, no eye movement clue was evident. So when judging the honesty of a speaker, remember, the eyes do not have it.